Hello and welcome. I would like to talk now about the two creation stories and the orders of creation. And the point that I really want to make here is just to simply note that there are two creation stories and they have somewhat different meanings. And it's important, I think, it tells us a lot about the Bible that it starts off right away with two different creation stories, clearly not meant to be not meant to be factual accounts because they don't agree with each other. So I'm going to share with my screen with you and talk about the talk about the orders of creation, as I call it, and I hope that you can now see on your screen this chart, the orders of creation. And what I've done here is simply taken the two creation stories, the first from Genesis 1 up until Genesis 2, verse 3. And then the second creation story begins at Genesis 2, verse 4, and runs through that chapter. And in both cases, I mean, in the first case, it talks about the 7 days, the 6 days of creation, the 1 day of rest. When we think of creation, we most often think of that story because it is first and because it's nicely laid out as 7 separate days. But then it starts over again and says, these are the orders of creation when the earth was created. And then it talks about in the day when it starts, the earth was barren and there was no plants and animals yet because God had not created them, but there were streams emerging up from the earth that would occasionally flood the whole earth and water it, sort of like the Nile does periodically in Africa and Egypt. Around the Nile is very fertile ground for farming and so forth, but they don't get the water primarily from rain. They primarily get the water from the flooding of the Nile. Will occasionally flood up and cover the plains and then recede, and everything has been watered. That's sort of the image here at the beginning of the second creation story. There is an earth, there is water that emerges from the earth and waters it, but there are no plants and no animals. In the first creation story, of course, there's the void and the darkness, and God says, let there be light in the darkness, let there be day and night. So in the first story, it begins with void and darkness. The second story begins with earth and streams emerging from beneath it. And in the first, God creates light and day and night. In the second story, it begins with nothing yet on the earth, no plants, no animals, just earth and water. On the second day of creation, in the first story, it says, God says, let there be a dome separating the waters above from the waters below. So now you get water. Notice the second creation story starts with water. The first creation story gets water on the second day, water from above, water from below. So you've got the whole earth covered with water, separating waters above from waters below. All there is below is water, and above there's water that periodically comes down through the sky. So there's a dome of heaven. I think I described that last week, that they imagine a flat earth with a dome over the earth. Above the dome is heaven and waters in the heavens, and below the dome is the earth with some things upon it. So in this second day of creation, God creates the waters above and the waters below. The second step immediately in the second story is that God creates Adam from the dust of the earth. So again, the first step of the second story, you had the earth, but no plants, no animals, occasional water. And a second step in the second creation story, God takes some of the earth, dust of the earth, and creates the human being, creates the male human being, creates Adam. The third day of creation, in the first story, God says, let there be dry land separating waters and vegetation. So the waters had covered the earth. Now the land emerges from the waters and there's dry land. In the second creation story, the third step or the third day, the garden is created, the trees and the rivers from Eden. So God creates the trees particularly are named, and river is named. Again, flowing up out of the earth is a river. There's not rain imagined exactly, but the flowing up out of the earth of the river from Eden, creating four main waters going out to water the earth. And right away there, the man is instructed to care for the garden and eat any fruit except that tree of the knowledge of good and evil that leads to death. So this is the third step of the second creation story. You've got the garden, you've got waters as a source of vegetation, and the man is instructed to care for the garden and eat the vegetation. There are no animals yet. On the fourth day of creation, God in the first story says, let there be lights in the sky. So there's no more, it's now no longer solid darkness. There's day, there's a sun for the day and a moon for the night. So it's not a void of complete darkness anymore. There are lights. On the third day, where are we? On the fourth day of creation. In the second story, remember, we already have Adam and we have plants. In the second story, on the fourth day, or the fourth phase, wild animals are created and birds of the sky are created. And Adam names them all. And then the woman is created from the rib of the man. We know that story too, that that the woman is created from the rib of man. We don't always remember and notice that it's actually part of a different story, not the same story as the 7 days of creation. It's the second creation story when the woman is created from the rib of the man. On the fifth day of creation, God creates the water creatures in the first story and the sky creatures. So you get fish of the sea and birds of the sky in the second story. So I'm sorry. This is confusing, isn't it? In the first story, God creates on the fifth day the creatures of the water, creatures of the skies. In the second story, we already have the woman and the man and plants, but no animal, plants and animals. And the serpent tricks the woman to eat from the forbidden fruit, and Adam also eats it. And then on the sixth day, the sixth and final day of the creation of the world, God creates in the first story the land creatures and the cattle and the creeping wild things and the human beings, male and female, and instructs them to go out and multiply and fill the earth and use the plants and animals for food. So all the way up, it takes till the sixth day for the culmination. And on the same day, God creates all the land creatures, including human beings, and creates humans, male and female. He created them. So And the point here is to notice the differences on the sixth day. In the second creation story, the man and the woman have already eaten the forbidden fruit. And so God finds out, curses the serpent for tricking the woman, curses the woman for eating the fruit, curses the man for going along with it, and both of them, and with specific spelled out curses. You know, the serpent will have to crawl and eat dust along the ground and be trampled by the man or by the offspring of the woman. The woman is cursed to painful childbirth and to various other chores, and the man is cursed to, by the sweat of his brow, get food from the earth. And so then God makes Adam and Eve clothes, because now they're embarrassed about themselves and they weren't before. And on the next phase, the seventh phase of the second creation story, God sends the man and the woman out of the garden and bans them from coming in again, puts guards to keep them from coming in. Of course, on the seventh day of creation, seventh day of the first creation story, God rests and is pleased with everything that has been created. So that story ends with God resting. There's been no violation by Adam and Eve at that point, and Adam and Eve are still in the garden. In the second creation story, it ends with the man and woman beginning to reproduce, but having already been kicked out of the garden. So simply notice again that the first story begins with void and darkness, ends with people being told to go and multiply and fill the earth and use the plants and animals for food. They're not kicked out. They're just simply told to go and do that. And then God rests, and God's in his garden resting. In the second story, it begins with earth and streams, and it ends with the man and woman beginning to reproduce. So the final end of each story is people are going out to multiply. So that's the creation story. How did the world come to be, human beings come to be, and human beings get launched as a species that goes out and multiplies and fills the earth. These are two different stories that are told about how that happened, how the creation comes to take place. So again, I think it's, I think to my mind, it's pretty clear that they're not meant to be factual accounts. Each are, arguing a different order of creation. There are two different stories that account for and tell us about who God is, how God is related to the earth and human beings, who human beings are, how we're related to the earth and to God. And important parts of what it means to be human here, as they call it in one of the films, or one of the videos, ask you to read the human condition of always questing for more, violating what God has provided, and so forth, but God being the source of life, the creator of all. I find it also interesting, if you read, I'm not going to go back over it right now, but if you read and review the first creation story, it basically follows a kind of natural pattern of the way science tells the creation story of a void, darkness, creation of light, earth, and there's water first, and then plants and animals second, and then human beings emerge from that. It's sort of a natural order. The second one simply does not follow that at all. It begins with the garden, but there's not yet any plants in it. There's not any animals in it. And then the animals are created, and Adam names them all. And the man, what really is out of natural order, is that the man is created first after the vegetation, but no animals yet. Animals are created after Adam has been created, after the man has been created. And then after all of that, the woman is created. So it doesn't really follow the way things might naturally develop. It's more clearly a sort of epic tale, a story for its meanings rather than for its factual account. Okay, I hope you will send me some questions about that. I'm wondering, were you familiar with the two creation stories? Did you have in your mind that there are two creation stories? What do you think about the fact that they don't agree with each other? And what are some of the significant meanings that you notice in that? I'll post a copy of this this chart as well, and you can take a look at that. And again, I do encourage you to send me some questions. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Okay.